tell everyone as much as you possibly can. Stop holding back things. So examples would be, we gave everyone in our company our P&L every month. We shared our full P&L and said, here's how we make money. Here's how we spend money. Help us figure out how to do more or less of that, right? When people understood how we made our money, then they started saying, well, maybe we should be spending more time with these clients and maybe we need to not do so much over here. Like if we're seeing it, actually mortgage companies is going down.
Welcome to the Manage Self, Lead Others Leadership podcast with Nina Sunday for experienced and aspiring people managers. This show will help you explore ways to become a more intentional leader. Each episode, host Nina Sunday speaks with some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share a passion to elevate and transform team culture. Workplace culture hides in plain sight. Is yours flourishing? Join the movement to make your workplace a better place to work. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others.
Chris Dyer is a culture and remote work expert, a former founder CEO of People2G. His companies consistently were named a best place to work. His most recent book, published 2023, is The Power of Company Culture: How Any Business Can Build a Culture That Improves Productivity, Performance and Profits. Inc. magazine ranked Chris Dyer as the #1 leadership speaker on culture. Countless companies have unlocked productivity, performance and profits by implementing his 7-pillar strategy. Well, welcome, Chris Dyer, and very excited to meet with you and talk to you today about your wonderful book, The Power of Company Culture, and it's the second edition, which is fantastic. I think I want to start by asking you a little bit about your story, about how you came to write the book, because your story about your response to the 2009 hiccup to the US economy that affected the world.
Sure. So, I mean, we were heavily invested in the mortgage companies as clients. And so 40% of our business was coming from them because they were like hiring nonstop. I mean, they couldn't hire enough people. And so all of a sudden they all go out of business and 40% of my business is gone. 40% of my receivables is uncollectible. And it's like, what do? Right? Do we have to pack up shop? Are we done? Are we laying people off? Or is there something else we can do? And I realized I needed big ideas, big solutions. I needed to really think about what we were going to do. And nobody had any good ideas. Now, how is this possible? I've hired really smart people. How is it possible they're not coming to me with these brilliant ideas and, ways we could save the company or things we could do? The culture, right?
Yeah.
I had created the culture in such a way that I was the big idea guy, and I was the one who came in and saved the day, and I would ride in on my horse and, be the great knight and save the day. I wanted to change the culture, and I said, great, there has to be a book that says, what is the best culture? And I can just go read that. And to my shock, there wasn't a book that told me what exactly you were supposed to do, because so many times everyone is out there telling you culture is an art. It's some creative thing. It's some, mysterious, maybe nefarious thing that happens. And that's total bogus. Culture is a science. And there are these very specific things we can do over and over and over again. It's repeatable in every great business that I had to discover, right? And that's what the book's about.
So you decided to explore case studies of the best companies. Is that right?
I read close to 300 books. I read every study, every case study I could find. I started a podcast. I talked to thousands of top senior leaders, and I took all of that and said, I'm hearing the same thing over and over again in different ways, slightly different language, right? But I'm hearing the same big, broad themes from these people and in these books about what was success and what worked. What are their best boss they ever had do? Like when I started asking them these really important questions, one of my superpowers is ideation, meaning if you throw 1,000 good ideas at me or just 1,000 ideas, I can say, hey, these two are really those are the two, right? The rest are okay, but like I'm good at helping you pick out, right? That was what I was good at in my company. And so I felt like in this exercise, there's all this stuff. these 7 things. These are the things. And I went back and tested and tested and tested. And it turned out to be, it kind of held up to the testing that we did after.
Yes, you mentioned in your book your 9 years you spent. It was a radio show that is now on iTunes and iHeartRadio. It's called
Yes.
Talent Time, correct?
Talent Talk. Yeah.
I'm now 4 years into mine, and I am learning so much because I go, oh, I don't know much about decision making. Who's the best decision maker expert that I can find? And I'm learning through interviewing thought leaders in my areas. And you did 9 years of it. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, 9 years, and it was fun, and I loved it. But I'm happy to have a little vacation from it for right now. So we did 2 guests every Tuesday at 1:00 my time, live. And
live, yeah. Well, it is a conveyor belt, isn't it?
Yeah, it was just like, come on, let's go.
Yeah. So you also say that once you tuned into the power of company culture, you started seeing it everywhere. It's a bit like the reticular activating system. When you decide to notice something, suddenly that's what you see. But you also saw that when you were looking at these case studies, that certain patterns started to pop up. So you are a pattern spotter.
Right.
Well, that's a really good skill. So I'm interested in the Google case study because I've looked at Project Aristotle, and I think you make reference to it, the one about social sensitivity and conversational equality. So is that one that impressed you?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much. I feel like, Google has gotten so much attention, but the thing is, Google measures like so much, and they may measure what they measure, right? I mean, this is one of their superpowers is measurement.
Yes.
And continues to be, because they want to know what makes a great team, and they want to know what makes great interactions, and they want to know what makes great client. I mean, they're so fascinated. They measure and they measure and they measure, and that's just a part of their ethos.
Your book is peppered with lots of case studies, and there's a list of different companies, Costco, Adobe, Amazon, Warby Parker, Zappos, Facebook, Nike. Which one do you want to make reference to in terms of a case study of great culture? I mean, you talk about Caesars Entertainment as well from Las Vegas.
Yeah, I did. And, I use Caesars as actually a counter because I'm so confident that my way of doing recognition is best. And I kind of caught myself and I said, to be 100% confident, to be that absurdly I'm right must mean I'm probably wrong. And so I said, I'm going to go find someone who did it, who does recognition just as well as I do, but in a totally different way. And I stumbled upon Caesars Entertainment through the podcast that I did and found out that they did it not the most opposite way that I do it, that I teach my clients when I work with people. And there's a reason why it works for them. What they did is and they have properties all across the world and it's a much bigger thing, but they had a store where you could buy different types of things, iPads and bicycles and golf clubs and all these prizes with points. And you got points because a client who came to the property filled out a survey and said, on this date or whatever, like the valet people really helped me, or the bell person was great, or the front desk person really made my day, did something special. And they don't award those points to a particular person. They award them to everyone who was on shift that day.
Oh, isn't that great?
So you're all in it together. It doesn't matter if you were the one extrovert who went and did because maybe it took 2 of the introverted people to go actually pick up the luggage and get it to the back and do the heavy lifting and figure it all out while the really flashy person was talking to them and making their day or whatever. It's a team effort. So they got awarded team points. Now, the reason it works is, one, the clients, the customers were giving out the points, not the employees, not the managers, because there's gaming that goes on there. It starts to become we've seen it over and over again in companies. If everyone gets their friends to all put them in for the same thing and they all get the points and the extra things and stuff. 2, their client base, and he admits this in the case study and on the podcast, is a lot of our people that work for us could never afford an iPad. And when they get enough points that they could buy their kid an iPad to you go to school and use that, that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And they don't forget that. Right. And so it makes such a huge splash, such a big impact in their life or someone in their family's life that it makes a difference about them sticking around and wanting to be a part of their organization.
Mm. Well, let's talk about this part 2 of your book, which is the 7 pillars of culture success. And we have spoken a bit about acknowledgement, which was pillar number 4. But let's start at the top. Number 1 is transparency. And there's just tell us really how to increase transparency and what you mean by that.
Tell everyone as much as you possibly can. Stop holding back things. So examples would be, we gave everyone in our company our P&L every month. We shared our full P&L and said, here's how we make money. Here's how we spend money. Help us figure out how to do more or less of that. Right. So when people understood how we made our money, then they started saying, well, maybe we should be spending more time with these clients and maybe we need to not do so much over here. Like if we're seeing it actually mortgage companies is going down, why are we going to be building a bunch of tools for that? If we're seeing staffing and recruiting going up, we should be doing more there. So we help them understand where to come up with good ideas by them knowing where the money was coming in from. And then when they understood where the money was being spent, they started saying, well, did you know we could go and save money if we did it over here with this thing? Did you know we could probably get bulk pricing if we put all this together over here? I mean, they had all these great ideas that I never had, right? So they made us way more profitable. So
you also talk about the disc profile, which I love, and I know I make sure everybody gets everybody's disc in my little world, and we debrief the disc profile. Ray Dalio in his book, he uses the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and everybody knows everybody's profile. How have you found that everybody knowing everybody's profile made a difference?
Yeah, so eventually we got so big that like everyone could know everybody's. But when we started, it was just a great way to like help everyone understand. What we did do is make sure that one, everyone's profiles were available to everyone in the company. So if you were going to have to go to someone you didn't know as well, or you hadn't worked with yet, and you were smart, you go open up their profile and read a little bit about how they like to work and how they start off meetings, and you could be really effective with that person, right? We made sure everyone on the team that they did this every year. They revisited, they talked about it, they shared what their profile was, how they like to work and all of that. So it really helped teams be more effective. But I will tell you the number one way that I used this that was the absolute magic was when I had 2 people who were mad at each other, not getting along and, just having a hard time. They might have been on 2 different teams or whatever. Eventually, sales and operations or 2 different senior leaders, somebody starts having a little bit of a tiff, right? And what you do is you send them each other's disc profiles and say, read this. And then I would have a meeting and I would say, now tell me why the other person is not happy.
Yeah.
And they would say, I noticed in their profile, it said they don't like a lot of chit chat in the beginning of meetings. They like to come in, get business done, and then they'll chit chat at the end. And I came in and because this person didn't seem to like me, I was doing more chit chat at the beginning.
Right.
I was trying to build more rapport and they were just getting more frustrated and angry because they just want to get to business.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's amazing.
I'll have a link in the show notes. We've got a whole episode on the DISC profile. So if anybody wants to know more about being direct, influencing, steadiness and compliance or conscientious, the DISC profile, you can find out more. So it's good. Now, the second pillar is positivity. And you said yes for a year. Tell me about that.
2018. So this is a story that I think I got added in the second edition. I actually read a book by Shonda Rhimes, which is A Year of Yes. And anyone doesn't know her, she's written like so many big blockbuster films that tend to be more chick flicks, but not exclusively, like Grey's Anatomy and things like that. But
that's right.
Yeah. So she, her family was famous for, kind of giving her a little bit of grief because she would get invited to go to the White House and they were all like, well, you're not going to go. And she's like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you say no to everything. You never go. You never say. And she realized that she had become a no person. And so she decided to say yes for a year. Now, I had overheard my wife listening to this audiobook, and I went immediately, read the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook and I went, I got to do this. I've got to find this out. Now, there's a very funny Jim Carrey movie about saying yes. And there's also, this comes from a British story. It was a very famous play, and then later on a movie on the same line of like, what happens in your life when you say yes to everything, all these unexpected things. Well, the best thing that happened to me is I ended up in Guatemala
Yeah.
at a conference that was supposed to be 200 people that turned out to be like 18 people. A volcano went off and we got stuck there for like a week. Like all of the on paper, if I told you all the things that happened that went wrong and shouldn't have happened, you would have been like, this was the worst decision you made. But I said yes, I went, and I made some of the best friends that I've ever made. I'm still close with all these people. They send me business all the time. Like I could not have, I would have never had this amazing experience if I had gone around saying no to everything.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. Well, anybody listening to this, they might be inspired to start saying yes more. That's interesting. And you talk about appreciative inquiry too in positivity.
Yeah.
Is that worth
Yeah.
mentioning? I'm not sure what that is exactly.
Appreciative inquiry is a study of psychological science, of positive psychology. And so what it basically is focusing on what's working.
Right.
So if you had 5 salespeople, 2 are killing it, 1 is okay, and 2 are terrible, what do most leaders do? They go to the 2 people that are terrible, that are not making their number, and say, put me on every email. I want to be in every meeting. We're going to meet every day at 8:00. I'm going to micromanage you to death until either you get better or you quit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not what appreciative inquiry says we should do. Appreciative inquiry in the positive leadership says, let's go talk to the 2 people who are doing well. Why are those 2 salespeople doing so well? How is it they sell? What do they focus on? What are their habits? What do they do? What makes them curious? And then can we have them teach everybody else?
Yeah.
Right? And what we find out is that when they share their wisdom, those people that are below them tend to get a lot better and do a lot better. Now, sometimes they don't. We got to fire those people. Sometimes it's not the right person. We made a bad hire. That's fine.
Yeah.
But usually what I see is those people suddenly do a lot better than they ever would have with you all over their butt trying to micromanage them every day.
Absolutely. And, I've delivered sales training with teams where I make sure I find out what are the best people doing right. And I am so totally surprised that no one else in the team knows that. And I go, well, what is the sales manager doing? Isn't that the sales manager's job? But I guess it's my job as the facilitator. We've already spoken about the 4th pillar, which is acknowledgement. So let's move on to the 5th one, which is uniqueness. And I do remember when you were with your People 2G team and you were trying to work out how to face the the onslaught of this business loss in 2009. You were trying to identify what was unique about the business, and nobody could really come up with anything. So you realize that having a unique selling proposition is all important. Is that right?
Right. I mean, when I was asking them what's unique, well, we have great customer service and we have fast turnaround times. And I'm like, yeah, so does everybody else. Or if they don't, they're lying and say they do, right? How do we figure this out? How do we come up with what really makes us unique and talk about those very specific things? And they might be a little bit different for each sales channel and for each different type of buyer.
Yes.
And so that's one part of it. And that's the marketing lens, right? We have to think about. The second part of the uniqueness pillar is what makes us unique as human beings. Right. And for us to be very curious in meetings and with our people, what makes you unique? Not what makes us all the same. Right. And there's a really bad habit of like, oh, you like the sports team I like, or you went to the college I went to, or you're in the fraternity or sorority I was in. That makes us connected because that makes us the same. And that's how a lot of the unintentional prejudices happen when we're hiring.
Because we're looking like people like them.
Yes.
But we need diversity in the team.
Right. And so I believe most people are not out there trying to be racist, bigoted, whatever. They're just full of bad habits. And the bad habit is I notice these things are like me. If they're like me, I'm good. They must be good. Therefore, I'm going to hire them. And that doesn't work, right? We get a bunch of people that all look the same, act the same, talk the same, and we end up at a company that has no good, new, fresh ideas. So if we start thinking about diversity of thought and we start talking about what makes us different and celebrating what makes us different, then we like people who are different, and we start looking for people have on their application that they have different skills than what we have here, and they've had different experiences than what we've had. And that should make us want to talk to them and bring them in for an interview.
Well, you do talk about, I think, in somewhere else in the book about how to eliminate groupthink, and that's to have in meetings a devil's advocate, someone
Yes.
that deliberately. It's something that happens in debates. If in debating teams, that if you might be assigned to be on the negative side, and yet your personal opinion might be positive, but you learn
Yes.
by having to take the other person's side. So, tell us how that might work. The devil's advocate idea in a meeting. How might that work?
And I love that you know that, because I was in a speech and debate thing for many years in high school. And I learned so much by having to learn somebody else's. Even you're right, I was adamantly not that opinion, but I had to go debate it, right?
That's right.
So I learned from one of my mentors, David Marquet. He's a retired commander in the Navy of submarines. And he wrote a book called Turn the Ship Around, which is one of my favorite books.
Right.
And he talked about in there the designate the devil. They had to come up with more ways to get people to practice delivering bad news. So I've actually had worked with clients and gone in where they told me people won't give them bad news, right? And I literally would write down fake bad news, or I had them write down fake bad news, put it in a hat, pull it out, and go have to tell their boss fake bad news. And they're still sweating, and they're still upset, and they're still nervous. And I said, but it's not real. Like, why are you nervous? This is a fake thing. And there, people are just programmed to not want to disappoint and to, right?
Well,
So
people shoot the messenger.
that is true. They shoot the messenger, right? And so this exercise that I learned is, if you have a meeting, you put, depending on how big it is, you might add more jacks in there. But if there's 5 people, add 2 jacks. And if there's 9 or 10, add 3. Just keep kind of, depends on how big the meeting is. But you give everyone a card, and if their card is not the jack, they get to tell what they want. But if their card is the jack, they're the devil. Okay.
You
And
just
so no one
deal
just hand
cards
them
out.
out. No one knows who's going to be the devil that time,
Right.
or the devils. And now it's their job to poke holes, to argue, to suggest the other things, even if, to your point, it is not their actual opinion. Now, the variation I made was that then we would go around and I added on to the exercise by saying, I want everyone to guess who the devils are. And they usually could pick out one pretty clearly, but the other ones they could never guess, because as soon as 1 or 2 people start disagreeing and arguing and sharing their devil's advocate opinion, everybody else starts doing it. It becomes very clear. Now the group thought is not, let's all agree. Now it's, let's find the best solution. Let's really poke at this. And the second thing we had to add on was by giant demand, was if they were the devil and they really did agree with the idea, they wanted the opportunity at the end to say why they agreed with it.
Right.
They really thought it was a good idea, because they didn't want a good idea to not see the light of day if it really was.
Excellent. That's lovely. All right. Pillar 6 is listening, and you talk about active listening. Tell us how that manifests inside companies and how it affects culture.
So at the micro level, great leaders need to be great listeners. I noticed that all of the best leaders I've ever known sit in a meeting and barely talk. They take great notes, they listen, other people talk a lot. And when they do talk, it's impactful and people listen, because they're not just flapping their mouth all day long, right? And that really allows their people to have ownership and to feel like they have a voice and all of that. At a macro level, it's how does the company make sure that people feel heard? How do we ensure that we're hearing from them about how they're feeling, what they need, what's going on in their work, so that the organization at a high level can address those concerns and help them in a really meaningful way? Now, in the book, I talk about, we do a 1-question survey. And so that was how we addressed it. I did a 1-question survey every week. And I took that data and I came back to them before the next question the next week and said, here's what I heard. Here's what I'm going to do about it. And then once a month, when we had our company-wide meeting, I would say, here are all the questions I asked this month. Again, this is what we heard. Again, this is what we're going to do, or this is what's been done so far. And we're constantly addressing so they felt heard. Now, to be honest, sometimes the list got a little long. And so then I started putting in good things. I was like, who's really killing it for you? Who's a great employee? Who's your best employee this month? What's the organization doing well? Like, where should we be thinking about selling more? Where should we be innovating more? And I got even great stuff there. Again, they felt heard.
Yes.
I also had time to catch up on the 12 things they told me we were screwing up and we had to go fix,
Right. Excellent. And then the final one is mistakes and how organizations handle mistakes. And it is such a big impact on culture, because what were you saying, that if they control and punish, it creates an unwelcoming atmosphere. You have revolving door staff and poor morale. So how can companies treat mistakes as a learning experience?
Sure. So quickly to define mistakes versus errors. Errors are, I'm overworked, I'm not paying attention, I haven't been trained properly, I'm multitasking. Those are errors. Those are not cool. We don't accept those. Okay. So anyone listening out there, I'm not saying when someone does something wrong that it's automatically like, oh, no problem, let's figure it out. Like, there are times when, no, you're doing a bad job and we need to fix this, right? If you're a nurse and you're multitasking and you give the wrong medicine and someone dies, that's not a mistake. So now mistakes are, I'm going to try something new. I thought with all the information I had, I thought this was the right decision. And I learned that it wasn't. Realize now in hindsight, I should have done something different. But at the moment, like, I knew X, Y, and Z, and that's the decision I made. And so that's when the organization or your boss or your team should say, we see why you made that decision. Here's the information you didn't have. And now next time you can make a better decision, but we're not mad at you. We understand you only had this amount of information. Here's how you do better next time. How do we train you? How do we uplift you so that you can be better and better, instead of, you idiot, you should have known better, or why didn't you ask more questions, or whatever. Or
even workflow, there might be a check and balance that doesn't exist that needs to exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we have we have an airline that's only in the United States called Southwest Airlines. And they are famous for they're famous for two things. One is they are a little bit crazy. Well, three things, but they're a little crazy on the intercom. They can be funny and they're a little loosey-goosey and they have a lot of room to play around and be funny. And it's not so serious in the cabin. But the other thing they're really famous for is that if an employee makes a mistake, they will never criticize that employee publicly.
Right.
They will never say that employee did something wrong, in the sense of, they always back the employee up. And because if the employee believes they did the right thing based on what they understood, what was happening with the customer, the company backs them up. Privately, they may need to retrain, they have conversations, they figure it out. But no, that's why they're so loose and they feel free to have fun on the intercom, because they know if they did something they weren't supposed to, they're going to have a conversation. They're not going to get in trouble or get fired.
Right. Lovely. All right. Then you've got good advice in part 3, which is around influence and the importance of learning to be a good presenter and not avoiding it.
Yeah. So the third part is really, how do you make it happen? So the first part is like, what do you got to do not to suck at culture? The second part is, how do you have great culture? And the third part is, if you believe me and you think I'm right, how do you actually make it happen? What's the change management piece that is elusive to many people, right? There's a lot of high-paid consultants that understand how change management work, and everybody else is kind of a mystery. And I talk about, how do you present well to people? How do you bring up your ideas? How do you help those that like to drag their feet? I used to call them the flip phone crowd. Now, that's not such a popular term. Back in the day, when the iPhone came out, a lot of people would run to go get the iPhone. Those were the early adopters.
Yeah.
And as soon as they had their iPhone and told all their friends they liked it, another group of people got it. They're the mainstreamers. And then there was a whole bit of people that kept their little flip phones until they died, and they wouldn't upgrade. They weren't going to get that iPhone. They liked their phone the way it was. They didn't want to change, even though they could have a calculator.
I know
and a
exactly some people like that. Yes.
Yes. Those are slow adopters, and those are the people that are going to stop your change management initiatives. They're the people that will stop change and sabotage it and just go down kicking and screaming and make and bring in all this toxic poison because they're afraid of the change. And I talk about in there, how do you get them on board? How do you bring them along in a way that's healthy and happy and everything for everyone so that you can change the organization in a really positive way?
You do actually mention one of my favorite authors, Daniel Kahneman, and some work that he did with
Amos Tversky.
That's it. And it's prospect theory. And it's all about how senior leaders, they have such risk aversion that they really want to they want a guarantee that improving culture is going to have a return on investment. So how is prospect theory an important thing to consider when you're trying to influence up and change the culture from within? And you're not the top dog.
Yeah. We do definitely see this where there's that risk averse. So if anyone needs to understand, human beings would rather not lose $10 than they would potentially win 100.
Yeah.
So the loss, right? We fear loss far more than we enjoy the wins or the progress or whatever. And which is probably good. Keeps a lot of people out of the casinos in Vegas or places like that. But we have senior leaders saying, I guarantee me this, this is going to work. And ultimately, we never know if we do something, if it's going to work. But what we do know is that we can get incrementally better. We do know that by improving culture, there's never been anything bad that's happened. We're not going to see something negative occur. My counter to this is usually to get those senior leaders to try something big, because what we tend to do is say, well, let me prove it to you. And we're going to go do this little thing that's going to have a little impact. And then they go, yep, see, we did all that work and it really didn't change much. We didn't really see much.
Ah, right.
Right. So if you look at my 7 pillars and when we're talking about them and you said, you know what, we do transparency well, we've got listening down, but you know what, acknowledgement and maybe mistakes, boy, are we really lacking there. That's where you need to go do your program. Go and fix your acknowledgement, your recognition program, and then you will see a big shift in the organization. And then the CEO, the senior leaders will go, oh, well, that really helped. I'm really seeing what else can we do? Right? What else can we go after?
That's wonderful. Well, look, our time together is drawing to a close, and it's been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate you. How can people find you, and who do you work with?
I work with all types of organizations, from Fortune 500 organizations like Berkshire Hathaway companies to conferences and even, small companies that are just looking to improve their culture and trying to make, work better. In the end, I'm always trying to ensure that we are getting productivity, performance, and profits up. And so this is not just about, again, kumbaya around the campfire and holding hands and being all best friends at work. Yes, we want to have great connections and relationships, but the bottom line matters. Performance matters. Productivity matters. And I believe that culture is the only way that everyone in the organization can actually get what they want.
And I agree with you. And that's a reason I started this podcast. So thank you for that wonderful statement. I love it. Well, look, it's been a joy to discuss this with you. Now, out of interest, we have about 70 mutual connections on LinkedIn, and half of them are in Australia. How come you know so many Australians?
That's a good question. I did a few talks in South Africa, and a few of them I had when I was there. There was a lot of people from Australia, New Zealand, and just made it easier for it's only a 10-hour flight, I think, versus my 20-something hours to get there.
Right.
And so I met a lot of people there. I have met a few just other speakers, thought leaders. I'm still waiting to get my first in-person keynote in Australia. So if anyone out there wants to bring me in to go, I've done lots of virtual keynotes in Australia. So that's another thing. I worked with some different organizations. I think I recently did a big keynote for a group called Silver Rail in Australia that does all like the back end technology for all the trains and everything. So
Right.
So I end up doing a lot of virtual work. We can work out the time difference.
Well, half our audience listeners are Australian, so maybe you'll get an invitation from Australia.
There we go.
Soon. Well, thanks so much. I'll let you go. It's your evening over there in California, and my morning here in Australia. So I thank you for your time, and thank you very much for this wonderful book, The Power of Company Culture.
Thank you for having me on. Enjoy your cup of coffee. I'm going to go have my glass of wine, and we'll call it a day.
Indeed. Thanks so much, Chris. Bye for now.
Thank you.
This episode, we've been speaking with Chris Dyer, author of The Power of Company Culture, on the Manage Self Lead Others podcast for experienced and aspiring managers to elevate their leadership and transform culture by keeping up to date with trends in self-leadership and leading people. If you enjoyed this podcast, we'd appreciate it if you'd review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Feedback helps the world find us, and the more people listen to the podcast, the more we can invest to make it even better. Let's pause for a moment while I tell you about today's sponsor. As certain as we need oxygen, a leader needs a guide to grow our mindset, our emotional intelligence, as well as our skill set. Dan Silverberg's Leader Council, starting soon, puts 12 to 15 people together into a cohort, working together with accountability partners for the duration. It might be 12 months, 6 months. Who is this Leader Council for? Firstly, if you are in a C-suite role in a company with $100 to $500 million turnover, then your organisation has enough diversity with pricing power, distribution channels, a finance department, marketing and sales. This is for you. Go to Dan Silverberg's website, entelechy.ai to find out more, and your code to mention is Nina Sunday. You can also find Dan Silverberg on LinkedIn to request a conversation and mention my name, Nina Sunday. Secondly, if you're an entrepreneur, a founder-owner, a CEO with a company with $8 to $50 million turnover, Dan leads a Leader Council for this cohort as well. Aristotle coined the term entelechy, the realization of potential. This episode is your call to adventure. Go to entelechy.ai now to learn more. Until next time, bye for now. Have a great week.
Nina Sunday is on a mission to help leaders transform culture. To book Nina Sunday CSP to speak at your conference, visit ninasunday.com to request a proposal. Nina travels from Brisbane, Australia for in-person presentations Australia-wide. Twice certified virtual presenter, Nina Sunday presents virtually, globally, for any time zone.